The sun was sharp that afternoon, bouncing off the polished hood of Adrian's Porsche like it wanted to blind Liv. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, trying to keep her face neutral, but her stomach tightened, twisting with a mix of anger and disbelief. Adrian stepped out of the car, his grin wide, his eyes sparkling with pride, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside his sister. "This is success, Liv," he said, patting the car, his voice loud enough for anyone passing by to hear. It wasn't just a display. It was a statement, a challenge. Liv felt a hollow ache inside. The words stung because they weren't just about the car, they were about him claiming victory in a life they had shared. Adrian had always been competitive, but this was different. It wasn't just showing off, it was rubbing it in, a reminder that he had always been first, that he had always taken the spotlight. And for Liv, that spotlight had been hers once before he stole it. She remembered nights in their small living room, poring over ideas, drawing designs, creating concepts, dreaming big, believing in the future she could build. She had shared everything with Adrian, trusting him the way sisters trust brothers. But somewhere along the way, the trust had cracked. She didn't just feel betrayed, she felt invisible. The real shock had come months ago when she discovered that Adrian had taken one of her most important projects, the research she had nurtured for years, and pitched it as his own. She had walked into a meeting she thought was for brainstorming and realized everyone was already calling the idea Adrian's. He hadn't even pretended she existed in the process. The presentation slides carried his name. The investors clapped for him. And there she was, stunned, watching everything she had worked for vanish into someone else's hands. She had confronted him, her voice trembling, but his calm arrogance was a wall she couldn't break. "You weren't ready," he said. "Someone had to make it happen." His words weren't kind. They weren't gentle. They were a declaration of superiority, a reminder that, in his eyes, she wasn't enough. Liv had walked out of that meeting feeling the weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest. The room spun, the walls seemed to close in, and all she could hear was the echo of his voice repeating like a cruel mantra, "You weren't ready." She wanted to scream, to grab every document, every prototype, and show the world that it was hers. But the anger, sharp as it was, mingled with fear. Fear that she might lose her chance entirely if she acted recklessly. Fear that her career, her dream could slip through her fingers because she hadn't been bold enough, hadn't been loud enough. That night, alone in her apartment, Liv sat at her small desk, staring at the laptop screen, reviewing the contracts she had received from a venture firm months earlier. The firm had wanted to back her original designs, to invest millions in her ideas, but she had hesitated. She had doubted herself, questioning if her work was ready for the world. In the shadow of Adrian's betrayal, she felt small, uncertain, unworthy. She had turned them down. She had let the opportunity slip. And that decision had gnawed at her ever since. But betrayal has a way of igniting something inside. As the evening stretched into night, Liv felt a spark of determination light up inside her. She wasn't going to let Adrian define her success. She wasn't going to let his arrogance overshadow her potential. Every step he had taken to belittle her, every moment he had flaunted his achievements, had built a quiet, simmering fire in her chest. She opened her laptop and began to map out her next move. Each click and keystroke a small act of reclaiming power. Her mind raced with possibilities. She could confront him publicly, humiliate him, take back the recognition she had been denied. The thought thrilled her, gave her a sense of control she hadn't felt in months. But she also knew that raw anger could be dangerous. That striking impulsively could destroy the opportunity she had been waiting for. The one that could finally prove her worth on her terms. She needed a plan. She needed patience. She needed precision. Over the next few days, she began gathering resources. Reaching out to contacts quietly, avoiding any hint that she was mobilizing her own breakthrough. Every conversation, every meeting was deliberate. She measured her words, refined her strategy, and pushed aside the distraction of Adrian's constant boasting. Each time she passed his Porsche in the driveway, each time she heard him brag to neighbors or colleagues, her resolve grew. She imagined the moment when she would succeed, when the world would see her brilliance, and when Adrian would realize he had underestimated her. At night, she replayed the betrayal in her mind, not as a source of despair, but as fuel. She remembered his smug smile, the way he leaned casually against the car, the pride in his eyes, as if he had won a race she didn't even know she was running. That image became her compass. She would not allow herself to be sidelined any longer. She would reclaim her work, her recognition, and her future. And this time it would be on her terms, with no one to steal the credit. No one to diminish her achievements. The fire inside her became unstoppable. She began drafting proposals, refining her designs, rehearsing pitches. She studied the market, learned every detail about investors, competitors, and opportunities. Each night she fell asleep exhausted, but energized by the thought of what was coming. Revenge was no longer about destroying Adrian. It was about proving to herself that she could rise, that she could succeed, and that no one, not even her own brother, could take that away from her. As the first part of her journey closed, Liv understood one thing clearly. Betrayal had hurt her. Yes, but it had also awakened a side of her that nothing else could. The fire to reclaim her life, her work, and her dignity burned hotter than any resentment, more focused than any anger. And as she looked out her apartment window, the city lights twinkling below, she made a silent promise. She would succeed. And when she did, the world would know her name, her not Adrian. Not through boasting or luck, but through skill, determination, cool and relentless drive. That night, Liv closed her laptop, her mind racing with plans. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, filled with doubt, temptation, and the weight of her own emotions. But for the first time since the betrayal, she felt in control. She wasn't just reacting, she was preparing. And when the time came, she would step forward, not just to claim success, but to reclaim herself. The months after Liv's decision passed in a blur of focus and strategy. Every morning she woke early, determined to reclaim what Adrian had taken and to prove herself in ways he never could. Her apartment became a war room, littered with drafts, sketches, spreadsheets, and notebooks filled with meticulous notes. The betrayal still burned inside her, a constant reminder that she had been underestimated, dismissed, and stolen from. But now, that anger was a tool. She sharpened it daily, turning it into drive, into clarity. Every meeting with potential investors was a test of her resolve. She spoke with confidence, precise words, and conviction. She had been quiet for too long, letting Adrian's arrogance define the story. Now, every presentation, every conversation was her stage. She watched eyes widen at her proposals, felt their interest grow, and sensed the shift from doubt to respect. It was intoxicating, but it also made her cautious. She knew Adrian had influence in certain circles. One misstep, one leak, and her plan could crumble. The stakes were higher than ever, and that knowledge kept her vigilant, alert, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Still, the temptation of direct revenge lingered. Sometimes, late at night, she imagined confronting Adrian. She pictured standing in front of him, showing him the contract, the investor's letters, the proof that she had built something greater than he could ever claim. She imagined the look on his face when he realized she had outsmarted him, that his arrogance and betrayal hadn't stopped her, they had fueled her rise. It was satisfying to think about, to let the fantasy play in her mind like a movie. But each time a quieter voice reminded her that satisfaction was fleeting, and destruction could be permanent. Adrian remained unaware of the depth of her preparations. He continued flaunting his Porsche, hosting small gatherings, talking loudly about success while casually dismissing her achievements. Every boast, every display of wealth and pride only strengthened her resolve. She documented everything, mentally cataloging his weaknesses, his habits, and the arrogance that blinded him to the reality of her talent. This wasn't about cruelty, it was about understanding. She didn't want him to fail. She wanted him to realize he had underestimated her. That realization alone, she thought, would be a form of justice. Liv also wrestled with her own morality. She remembered the lessons their parents had instilled. Ambition is important, but so is character. She could see clearly that revenge might give her a rush of triumph, a moment of satisfaction, but would it also harden her, make her no better than Adrian had been? The struggle was constant. Every decision, every step forward forced her to weigh emotion against reason. She wanted to reclaim her life without compromising herself. She wanted to rise without being consumed by anger. But the temptation to strike, to prove him wrong in the loudest, most undeniable way, was always there, lurking at the edge of her thoughts. Her plan began taking shape. She focused on making her work irresistible to investors. Every prototype, every presentation, every pitch had to be flawless. She sought out mentors and advisors who could guide her without judgment. She networked in silence, building connections that would support her, not sabotage her. She learned to anticipate problems before they arose, to prepare for questions and objections with clarity and precision. With every obstacle she overcame, her confidence grew. She felt herself becoming stronger, not just professionally, but emotionally. The anger that had once threatened to consume her now became a steady flame of determination. The psychological weight was heavy. Liv often caught herself replaying Adrian's betrayal, analyzing it from every angle, wondering how someone so close could betray her so completely. She felt a strange mixture of hurt, disbelief, and determination. Nights were the hardest quiet moments where her mind replayed every word, every action, every moment of arrogance from Adrian. She felt the sting of jealousy, the burn of being overlooked, and the simmering desire to prove herself. But she also learned restraint. She discovered that patience was more powerful than confrontation. She realized that timing could make or break her ultimate success. The moment of reckoning, she knew, would come but only when everything was ready. Every decision was calculated. She evaluated every investor, every opportunity, every risk. She avoided unnecessary confrontations, even with Adrian, carefully, managing the tension so that he remained unaware of her assent. She imagined the eventual moment when the news would break, when the world would know her name and her achievements, and he would finally understand the consequences of his arrogance. But she also understood that real victory wasn't just in public recognition, it was in proving to herself that she could rise without losing her integrity. Her social circle noticed the change. Friends remarked on her confidence, her poise, her determination. Some wondered how she had become so sharp, so focused, but she shared nothing. She didn't need validation. She didn't need anyone to tell her she was right. The deal, when it came, would speak for itself. It would prove everything she had ever believed, not just to Adrian, but to herself. Adrian, meanwhile, continued, living in a bubble of arrogance. He boasted, he displayed wealth, he underestimated the quiet, relentless force building just out of sight. Liv observed him closely, not to sabotage him, but to understand him, to learn from his weaknesses. She recognized his skills, his charm, his ability to command attention, but she also saw the flaws, the overconfidence, the lack of humility, the blind spots that had allowed her to plan undisturbed. Every observation fueled her strategy, and every misstep he unknowingly made became a stepping stone in her path to success. As the deal neared finalization, the pressure intensified. Liv worked late nights, often losing sleep, pouring herself into the project. Her emotions were a mix of exhaustion, anticipation, and a quiet thrill. She felt a surge of satisfaction each time a prototype was approved, each time an investor showed interest. But beneath it all, the desire for revenge lingered, quiet but insistent. It whispered, "Show him. Make him see what he lost. Make him realize he underestimated you." She had the power to do it. She had the leverage. The world was about to witness her triumph, and Adrian was unwittingly a part of the stage. Yet the moral conflict persisted. Every night, she debated with herself, should she confront him publicly? Should she flaunt her victory, humiliate him, prove once and for all that she had surpassed him? Or should she rise silently, let the work speak, and preserve herself from becoming consumed by vindictive pleasure? It was a battle between emotion and reason, between the fire of revenge and the clarity of purpose. Liv realized that the outcome of this battle would define not just her success, but her character. When the final day of negotiations arrived, Liv was ready. Her presentations were flawless. Her pitches were compelling. Her designs were undeniable. Every detail had been perfected, every risk accounted for. She had transformed betrayal into focus, anger into precision, and doubt into relentless determination. The deal would be hers, and when the news broke, it would shake the very foundations of Adrian's arrogance. But even as she prepared for the public announcement, the voice inside her reminded her of restraint. She could have her triumph, her success, without hurting anyone. She could claim victory in a way that elevated her, not diminished others. And in that moment, she understood something vital. Revenge is fleeting, but accomplishment lasts. Recognition is temporary, but integrity endures. And so Liv stood at the precipice, ready to step into a world that would finally acknowledge her brilliance. Carefully balancing the thrill of vindication with the wisdom of restraint, Adrian had created the spark, the betrayal that ignited her fire, but she was the one controlling the flame now, guiding it toward her own destiny. The morning the news broke, Liv woke with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety twisting in her stomach. Her phone buzzed, constantly notifications from investors, colleagues, and even strangers praising her work. She scrolled through the headlines, barely daring to breathe. There it was, front and center. Local engineer signs $100 million deal for innovative design. Her name glared from every newsfeed. For a moment, the world paused around her. Every late night, every sacrifice, every plan she had carefully executed culminated in this single undeniable truth. She had won, but victory felt strange. It wasn't triumphant joy that surged through her, it was clarity. All the anger that had fueled her planning months ago had transformed into something quieter, sharper, more controlled. The desire to confront Adrian, to make him feel the weight of his past arrogance, lingered at the edges of her mind. She could see it clearly. She could storm into the house, wave her contract in front of him, and finally make him realize what he had taken from her. It would be satisfying. It would be revenge. But she hesitated. Adrian didn't need the proof. He had spent months flaunting his Porsche, broadcasting his success, pretending she didn't exist. And yet, here she was at the pinnacle he had claimed as his own. She imagined his expression, the confusion, the shock, the disbelief. She could almost hear the words stumbling out of his mouth. I didn't know she could. It would be perfect. A cinematic moment of payback. She clenched her fists, imagining the scene. And then, just as suddenly, the thrill of that image faded. She remembered every night spent planning, every choice weighed, every moral question she had wrestled with. Her parents' words echoed in her mind. Strength is not just in winning. Strength is in knowing when to fight and when to rise above. Liv realized that if she gave in to the impulse for revenge, she might feel satisfaction for a moment, but it would leave a mark on her soul. It would transform her victory into something hollow. The power wasn't in proving Adrian wrong, it was in proving herself right, without cruelty, without malice. Still, the temptation was real. She could feel it in the tension coiling through her chest. The idea of exposing his arrogance, of showing him exactly what he had underestimated, was intoxicating. Her pulse quickened at the thought. Months of preparation, sacrifice, and determination had led to this moment. She had the leverage, the evidence, the recognition. All she had to do was act. And yet, as she considered it, she recognized the danger. Revenge might feel good, but it could destroy something far more valuable than her pride, her integrity, her peace of mind. Even the fragile bond left with her brother. She took a deep breath and decided to confront the situation differently. Instead of entering the battlefield of words, she chose observation first. She drove to the family house, parked a short distance away, and watched Adrian through the window. He stood beside his Porsche, phone in hand, scrolling through the same news feeds that had flooded her notifications. His expression was not prideful as she had expected. It was uncertain, almost hesitant, as though the magnitude of her success was finally settling in. Adrian's posture softened when he realized she had arrived. There was no swagger, no loud declaration of superiority, just a quiet, uneasy awareness. "You didn't tell me," he said softly, almost in a whisper. The words held no accusation, only surprise. "You never asked," Liv replied, keeping her tone calm, measured. The tension between them was thick, but it wasn't charged with anger this time. It was charged with truth. Years of resentment, humiliation, and betrayal had led to this moment. But she refused to let it define her actions now. Adrian's eyes flicked back to the headline on his phone, then up at her. It's huge," he murmured. "Oh, shit. Be proud. I am proud. But I didn't think you were." His words faltered, and for the first time, he seemed small, not arrogant, not untouchable, just human. The arrogance that had once cut so deeply into Liv now appeared fragile, almost remorseful. She felt the old desire to strike, to make him feel the sting of all he had done, rising again. She imagined revealing every detail, every moment of betrayal, and watching him flinch under the weight of his misjudgment. But as she looked at him, she realized something important. Revenge was not the point anymore. The power wasn't in making him suffer, it was in controlling herself, in choosing how to respond. The act of rising above, of maintaining her dignity and composure, stronger than any verbal punishment or public humiliation. "I don't need revenge, Adrian," she said, her voice steady. "I just need you to see me. Really see me." Silence that followed was heavy with years of unspoken tension. Adrian's shoulders slumped. For the first time, she saw the boy who had once promised to protect her after their parents died. The brother who had lost his way in arrogance and fear of failure. "I do now," he said quietly. There was no triumph, no bravado, just acknowledgement. And that, more than any headline, any $100 million deal, felt like a victory. The Porsche gleamed behind him, small and insignificant compared to the moment unfolding. Liv didn't feel the rush of triumph she had imagined, nor the sweet revenge she had once fantasized about. She felt something deeper. Release. The anger, the planning, the tension, it all dissolved into clarity. She had succeeded not by hurting Adrian, not by proving him wrong, but by proving herself right. Her value, her work, her talents, they were undeniable. And they were hers alone. Walking away from the house, Liv felt a lightness she hadn't known in years. The fire that had driven her to plan, to prepare, to strategize, it was still there. But now it burned for creation, for growth, for her own life. She understood that revenge could feel thrilling, but it was fleeting. What endured was accomplishment, integrity, and the knowledge that she had risen on her own terms. And as the city stretched out before her, twinkling under the morning sun, Liv realized the ultimate truth. Success isn't about the car you drive, the money you make, or the headlines you dominate. True victory is quiet, internal, and powerful. It comes from overcoming betrayal, reclaiming your worth, and choosing growth over destruction. Adrian had been a catalyst, but the triumph was hers alone. She had won not through vengeance, but through clarity, discipline, and the courage to rise above. That day, Liv didn't just celebrate a $100 million deal. She celebrated herself. She celebrated the power to choose, the wisdom to forgive, and the strength to move forward without being chained to past anger. And in that moment, she understood. Revenge is never worth the cost if it steals your peace. But rising above, proving yourself and reclaiming your life, that is a victory. That lasts forever.